we're having a much more grown-up conversation about energy efficiency now than we were a decade ago. You know, primarily a decade ago, the focus was really on primary energy of technology, and a lot of focus on reducing how much a fan used in power and so on and so forth. And there are unintended consequences of that, you know, as there are in almost anything if your focus is very one-dimensional. But I think what we've seen as the conversation has grown up a little bit about what sustainability and energy efficiency really is all about, a lot more things have been taken into consideration in the round. So we're seeing products that are being developed that take much more account of things like their reusability and recyclability, their robustness, their use of embodied carbon, how flexible they are to changes in demand, all of these things that actually matter to customers. I think that conversation has really grown up, hasn't it, over the last 10 years? You must have seen that, like, objectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And also in the energy performance of buildings, actually. I mean, we still call it the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, but if you read Article 1, the subject matter of the EPBD, it's about all kinds of things, right? It's about making buildings solar ready, about making sure to put charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. It's about indoor air quality as well. And so actually it's not just an Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, it's a sustainable buildings directive. And sustainable in a holistic sense, right? Not just environmental impacts, but also the well-being of the building occupants, right? And how buildings fit in the wider built environment, and the role that they play, for example, for sustainable mobility. All of that is integrated, and you need to think about that holistically, right? Even if you're focusing only on environmental sustainability, energy is very important for HVAC equipment. Most of the environmental impacts come from energy consumption in use. But there are other impacts that this equipment has as well. For example, the embodied impacts of the materials that are in the product, or how it's treated at end of life, and the impacts that are associated with that. And for equipment that uses refrigerants also, obviously, if there is a leak of refrigerant, that can also impact the environment. So I think it's important to think about sustainability in a more holistic way. And I think that's also being done in the market and by the regulators. We see that there's more awareness of this. And to think of sustainability also in terms of, let's say, to put the people back at the center of the conversation, right? We build buildings for a reason, right? It's to create shelter for people and to create comfortable and healthy indoor environments. And I think it's good that we see sort of a shift in perspective, that buildings don't just consume energy. They're not just black boxes that consume energy, but we are consuming energy for a reason. And in fact, this goes to the very definition in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. There's a definition of what a building is. You think that's super basic, but it's really important, because it says a building is a construction with walls and a roof in which energy is used to condition the indoor environment. Okay, so you create, I mean, in the very definition of a building, you create a link between, yeah, we consume energy, but we do that for a reason, which is to condition the indoor environment. And if you're talking about energy performance or energy efficiency in a building, it's not just how much energy is consumed, but how much energy is consumed per unit value or per unit function, where the value for an HVAC system is the conditioning of the indoor environment. And I think for the first time in the history of the EPBD, that link has been made explicit. So that an energy performant building is a building that produces a healthy and comfortable indoor environment with the minimal energy possible, rather than just a building that doesn't consume any energy, because then we can all go back to live in caves, and we don't spend any energy, and it's super sustainable, but obviously we lose something in that process.
Yeah. Do you think that explicit statements like that are important, that you can't rely on the assumption that ventilation isn't just there as an energy consumer, that it does actually have a purpose to provide an adequate indoor environment for people to occupy that space, whatever it is, that somehow you need to explicitly say that in order for it to have meaning down the line when it comes to standards?
Absolutely. I think, in fact, it's one of the biggest changes, I would say, in the EPBD is just the symbolic victory of the recognition that energy and indoor environmental quality are related to each other, right? That you can't just look at energy. And it's especially when you are focused on policy and you're making policy instruments, you're making legislation, all of which is designed to reduce energy, you can have this sort of monomaniacal focus on do whatever it takes to reduce energy, and you lose track of the fact that people are using energy for a reason, right? Energy is prosperity. Energy gives us quality of life, and of course there are environmental impacts associated with energy, and we want to minimize those. But I think it's too easy to just focus on reducing energy use to a minimum without thinking about what value that energy is providing to people.